And if the Wanish family would like to come up to the podium, that'd be great. Good evening once again, Mrs. Wanisher. That's true. We have a proclamation commemorating the life and service of George F. Wanish. For those who know who George Wanish, he was a sheriff in Manitowoc County, in the early 70s, most of it, if I remember correctly. And as I was telling Mrs. Wanish the story, I do have a story after the proclamation. So, anyways, whereas George F. Wanish, being born on January 13th, 1927, was a graduate of Denmark High School with the class of 1944. Served nearly 10 years with the United States Navy during World War II and the Korean War, served an additional 13 years in the Army and Navy Reserves, retiring in 1987, and he passed away on November 19th, 2021. And whereas George F. Wanish was employed by both the city and the county of Manitowoc for 11 years as Manitowoc County Patrolman, 8 years as Manitowoc County Sheriff, and was a volunteer patrolman for the Sheriff's Department. He was active in county government. During his term on the county board, he served on the Public Property Committee, Manitowoc County Expo Incorporated, liaison members, and Ad Hoc Communications Committee. Whereas George F. Wanish was active in the community and was a lifetime member of VFW Auto OS Post 659 and was a dedicated member of Holy Innocents Catholic Church St. Francis of Assisi for over 50 years in many capacities. Whereas George F. Wanish was a husband, father, grandfather, and a great-grandfather who was proud of his God, his country, and his family. And whereas George F. Wanish was a strong leader who served the citizens of Manitowoc County in many capacities and contributed countless hours to improve the quality of life for all. Now therefore, we, Bob Zigabor, County Executive, and Jim Bryant, Manitowoc County Board Chair, along with the Manitowoc County Board of Supervisors, hereby commemorate the life and service of George F. Wanish and express their condolences to the Wanish family. Thank you for coming. I know it's tough times. And yes, sir. Glad to introduce yourself, please. I'm sorry.
I'm Dave Gloibler, son-in-law of George and Marilyn. We're in a room of public servants, and you all understand the sacrifices that you and your family have to make for your work. So you recognize and understand what the Wanish family went through. And they want to thank the board and Bob for this commemoration, this recognition tonight. We really, really appreciate it. It means a lot. Thank you so much.
And thank you for coming, definitely. And I have to relate a story I was telling Mrs. Wanish and all of you before the meeting. Many of you probably remember the old Mishicot Junior Fair back in the good old days in the 70s. That was one of our favorite fairs, in addition to the county fair. But my parents knew George very well, and he was sheriff at the time. I'm trying to think. I know I was before 10 years old, between 5 and 10, so as you get older, you forget those time periods too. But anyways, I remember meeting Mr. Wanish that day the first time, and I was very interested in him. He was hanging up posters for his re-election at the time. And whether it's good or bad, he was one of my influences in my early life about wanting to serve and being interested in politics. So, like I said, whether it's good or bad, I definitely respected George, and I liked him a lot. He called me several times after he retired and stuff about things on the county board, but we always got along well and really appreciated his service. So thank you once again, and hang in there. Thank you for coming. Thank you. All right, we'll open up to public comment. If there's anyone in the public wishing to speak to any matter germane to Manitowoc County business, please raise your hand. You can come up to the podium and give your name and address, and you'll be allowed approximately 3 minutes to speak. Is there anybody wishing to speak this evening? Is there anybody wishing to speak? We'll start back there. Yes.
Forest Lefebvre, 4932 Highway 147 West, Maribel. So yesterday at the Manitowoc City Council meeting, the formation of an EDI committee was presented. I spoke about the caution using diversity as a means to an end. Although the text of the EDI resolution is not suitable to be a foil for non-discrimination, it raises my concerns about what mentality we are installing in our future American leaders. In the EDI resolution, it states, committee members have lived experience in identifying as and belonging to under-resourced, underrepresented, and or marginalized communities. This makes me sit back and think, would this committee be subconsciously creating victors or victims by having to identify as under-resourced and underrepresented in order to be a member? In 1776, we became the United States. 246 years later, I feel as though through declarations and installing positive philosophy in our future American leaders, we can once again become we the people united. Ratified in 1787, our beautiful Constitution became the law of this land. We were able to agree to disagree civilly. Our First Amendment is beautiful. Oh, how beautiful it is to be able to share conceptual thoughts, whether we agree or not. Though it has come to my attention, some people are still disillusioned, and while our nation and county are existing in unprecedented times, I offer that a constitutional resolution being ratified in our county is the first step into a brighter, unified county community. Although, for whatever reason, certain board members may have their own interpretation of what our Constitution defines, let's bring up the discussion about making our beautiful county a constitutional county and upholding our Constitution provisions. I'd like to ask that a referendum for this fall's election to be added for voting as advisory to proceed. I am confident that we will find many whom desire to preserve sovereignty as we the people. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anybody else wishing to speak? Maura, I think you had your hand up.
Chip Yost, Centerville. Despite being on the tail end of a bad cold, it is important for me to be here tonight to make public input so there's no ambiguity about the reason if I was absent. To begin, I thank all the voters who signed my ballot access petition. I enjoyed listening to their concerns, varied as they were. I actually had a good time greeting folks, and there have been some heart-touching moments, both tragic and humorous. One woman I met fought back tears as she summarized her concerns for her grandchild and her addicted daughter. She felt as though she couldn't get help from human services for them. On the lighter side, I chuckled as one fellow responded to my request for his signature by quipping, and I quote, "Why the hell not?" And picture this, on a cold and snowy day, seeing a person walking on her knees for 4 houses down to grab a railing to hoist herself up after falling on an icy, snow-covered sidewalk. As I have done for the past years, I continue to advocate for a county-wide sales tax as a half cent on a dollar spent to reduce property tax burden for property owners. As of today, our state's COVID positivity rate is 25%. Our county's positivity rate is 35.08 with a goal of 5%.
Maura, you have about 30 seconds.
Thank you. That's about all I'm going to need. Please protect yourself, your loved ones, friends, and neighbors, and our whole county community by taking personal actions to stop the spread. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anybody else wishing to speak to the board this evening? Anyone else wishing to speak? Yes, ma'am.
Christine Gimai, 2000 Johnston Drive. Okay, you're a little taller here. I didn't have anything, well, I did have something planned and then I changed my mind, so I have a few issues that are on my mind right now. The first is, as was brought up, the EDI thing on the council, and bottom line, I am disabled in a few different ways. I live on a fixed income, and I have people around me that live on a very, very good income. We get along, we're neighbors. Nobody plays victim, which is what this encourages. There is no, we're humans. We're in an imperfect world. You're never going to have perfection, no matter how much they think they're going to solve everybody's problems. We're always going to have people that are going to have issues against other people because of their faith or what they believe or whatever. My next issue is the same thing, basically, only CRT in our schools. It affects the young people. We're impressing in their minds to be victims. It's like the article I read where white supremacists and the black victim and so on, you're teaching these kids to hate each other. I mean, don't you want your kids to go to school, talk to each other, get along, get better grades possibly because they can actually communicate? Then, my next one, to be done before my time is up, vaccinations. All right. Anybody in this room, you guys want vaccinations? Go for it. I back you up 100%. I choose not to. And I choose not to because I have congestive heart failure. My doctor encouraged it, but all the research that I did, and I mean all, proves that whatever you do, there's a good chance that it can cause even more heart failure, death, or other problems with your body. I've also researched and found out that in the boosters, they have genetic, what is oxide or hydroxide. Anyway, they inject this into your body and it separates to make like little razor blades going through your body, which would explain why people are getting blood clots, kids are having heart issues, adults are dying from. My uncle was in the hospital with my aunt with COVID, shots and all, and he ended up having the thing pulled out of him, the vent pulled out of him on Friday, and died seconds after that.
Christine, you have about 30 seconds.
Thank you. But he had 2 strokes in the process. Now, were these just health strokes, which he's never had a health issue? But now all of a sudden he has 2 strokes and he's got COVID. So I look at it that, as I said, you want to get a COVID shot, go for it. I'm all for it. But also, it's my constitutional right to say, I don't want this injection. I will take my chances. I know where I'm going. So if it hits me and I get sick and I pass, that's my responsibility. That's my choice. I have that right in this country. And there are too many people trying to change that. We're all Americans. We all have rights. That includes making choices about our health, what we learn, what we shouldn't learn. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anybody else wishing to speak this evening to the board? Anybody else wishing to speak? And for a third and final time, anybody else wishing to speak? Seeing none, I'll declare public comment closed at this time. Communications are shown on the agenda. There is no unfinished business from our last meeting, so we'll jump right into appointments by the county executive. First up is for the Personnel Department to appoint Personnel Director Chris Eisenshank. So motion by Supervisor Aulick, second by Supervisor Marsh to appoint Christine as their new Personnel Director. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Congratulations, Christine. You can certainly come up to the podium. Or should I say the lectern? Is that the more official name?
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple real quick comments. I would first just like to thank County Executive Ziegelbauer for his confidence in my appointment today. I look forward to working with you. Sharon, in the back of the room, congratulations, well-deserved retirement. And thank you for all the mentoring and supervising over the last 24 years. That's really, I feel really has prepared me for this transition. And to the board, I look forward to working with each and every one of you. And certainly I can guarantee that the service and response that you're used to from our director, Sharon, will continue, and you can reach out to me anytime with any questions. So thank you all for your support.
Thank you. Wish you nothing but the best, Christine, and Sharon as well. Nothing but the best. You got a couple months left, yeah, but you're certainly welcome to speak sometime in the future. We can talk about that as well. I want to say final goodbye, but just a goodbye and I guess a farewell for the time being. But thank you both very much. Next up, Ethics Board, to appoint one member to succeed Jay Mushin for a 3-year term expiring February 28th of 2025, and the recommendation is for Jay Mushin. Motion by Supervisor Olick, seconded by Supervisor Niles to approve Jay. Any discussion on the motion? See none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carried unanimously. Expo Ice Center Board, to appoint one member to fill a vacancy for the remainder of the term expiring December 31st of 2023, and Bob's recommendation is for Savannah Schutte, I'm sorry. So, motion by Supervisor Banky, second by Supervisor Falkowski. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carried unanimously. And last but not least, for the Joint Dispatch Board, to appoint one member to fulfill a vacancy for the remainder of the term expiring December of 2022. And recommendation is for Jason Freeboth. So motion by Supervisor Hendrickson, seconded by Supervisor Dyzak. Discussion on the motion. See none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carried unanimously. Thank you very much on the appointments. We'll jump right in with committee reports. First up is Aging and Disability Board. Supervisor Wagner is the chair.
Thank you, Chairman Bryan. The next meeting of the ADRC will be on January 25th at the Heritage Center at 10 a.m. That's the end of my report.
Any questions for Supervisor Wagner? Thank you very much. Board of Health, Supervisor Metzger is the chair.
We met January 13th. COVID-19 cases continue to rise in Manitowoc County and have doubled in the past week due to the Omicron variant. 7-day average is now 161 cases. Hospitalizations in Northeast region have exceeded the peak of the pandemic. Manitowoc County is supporting updated CDC guidelines for quarantine and isolation. Testing capacity exceeded in county. Symptomatic people may not be able to get a test and are asked to isolate instead. Booster clinic, a success. Over 3,500 booster shots given by the wing. Manitowoc County would like to hire a community health strategic employee with ARPA dollars. Cost is $281,063. And the role would be help implement community health assessment and assist in the creation and implementation of the community health improvement plan. The nurse manager report, COVID-19 remained the predominant reportable communicable disease. Chlamydia remains the second with 17 cases. There's nothing to report in environmental health. The WIC department, there was November caseload, 942 participants, 559 families. December was 938 participants, 556 families. The 2021 contracted caseload is 890 participants. The 2022 contracted caseload is going to be 933. And just to make a comment, the health department has never brought up forcing people to get the vaccinations. Just so you know, that discussion was never ever brought up at the health department. I just wanted to make that clear, that we have not. Okay, and February 10th is our next meeting at 5 p.m. at the health department, and that's the end of my report.
Any questions for Supervisor Metzger? Supervisor Mink.
quick, I'd like to add to that. Everyone on the board, we actually took a poll, everyone on the Board of Health has received their booster. No one's had any side effects. Everyone's feeling pretty good. I'm of the firm opinion that the vaccine has probably saved hundreds of lives in this county alone. So as leaders here, community leaders, I urge you all to please get your vaccine and be very vocal that you got your vaccine. Don't be afraid to tell people. All right, that's all I'd like to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Mink. Anything else, Supervisor Metzger?
No, thank you, Mick, for suggesting all that stuff. Next meeting is February 10th, 5 p.m. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, Supervisor Falkowski is our representative there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no report for tonight, although our scheduled meeting is for February 2nd.
Any questions for Supervisor Falkowski? Thank you very much. Executive Committee, we actually met last week to discuss Manitowoc County's continuing participation in the Wisconsin County Utilities Tax Association. As of right now, we have not paid our dues for this month, for 2022. There's been some discussion at the state level about whether payments in lieu of taxes regarding decommissioned plants, and there's an example of one going in Sheboygan County, whether this is worth it. So we had Bill Gehring, who's actually the president of the Wisconsin County Utilities Tax Association and also a Sheboygan County Board Supervisor. He came and he spoke or participated in the meeting via Zoom, and we had a nice discussion. We did not make a decision at that night. I'm trying to set up a meeting for next week. It might not happen next week, but it will be in the near future. The consensus of the committee was to have Kyle Christensen, who is the Legislative Affairs Director for the Wisconsin Counties Association, and I guess a little bit more background information here as well. Alice Connors, who was the former lobbyist for the Wisconsin Counties Utility Tax Association, retired this past December. So in the interim, the Wisconsin Counties Association, through Kyle, has taken over the responsibilities of that. They have hired a new lobbyist. So, but we're going to try to have Kyle either speak via Zoom or come to the meeting. So hopefully we can set up that meeting. I'm looking for next week yet, but if it has to be a little bit further, when to go into February, we'll go from there. So, any questions on that right now? All right, thank you very much. Expo Ice Center Board, Supervisor Kavanaugh is our representative there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Expo Ice Center Board met Wednesday, January 5th. We approved a couple contracts for the coming fair, one with Snell Brothers that sponsors the tractor pull on Thursday night. Also approved the fireworks contract for Wednesday night. And there was a board member that also requested to be a superintendent for this year's fair, so that is going to be allowed, but it'll probably be a one-time thing because there's a shortage of superintendents like everything else. The Market Animal Committee had a request to erect the scales joining onto the Lester building. That was approved. Rummage-a-Rama is coming up on February 12th. That's the second Saturday in February. And I'd just like to add a little bit about our affairs at the fair with the proclamation tonight. Down at the state convention, she was the first runner-up, so pretty proud of her. Our next meeting will be February 2nd, and that concludes my report.
Any questions for Supervisor Kavanaugh? Thank you very much. Finance Committee, Supervisor Olick is the vice chair, and I know we didn't meet last time, but if you have anything to add, you're certainly welcome at this time.
No report, Mr. Chair. Next meeting is Valentine's Day, so I better send my wife flowers or I'll be on the couch again. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any questions for Supervisor Olick? Thank you very much. Highway Committee, Supervisor Benke is the chair. I know they also didn't meet, but you're certainly welcome to speak.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We did not meet. We will meet February 8th will be our next meeting, February 8th. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any questions for Supervisor Benke? Thank you very much. Human Services Board, Supervisor Hendrickson is the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No report. Our next meeting is January 27th at the Human Services Department, 4:30. Thank you.
Any questions for Supervisor Hendrickson? Thank you very much. Land Conservation Committee, UW Extension Education Agricultural Committee. Supervisor Wagner is the chair.
Thank you, Chairman Bryan. The Land Conservation Committee meeting will be March 17th. This month's meeting was canceled, so that's March 17th at the County Office Complex. And the UW Extension Education and Agriculture Committee meeting will be February 17th at 4:45 at the Office Complex. That's the end of my report.
Any questions for Supervisor Wagner? Thank you very much. Personnel Committee, Supervisor Marish is the chair.
Thank you. We met on January 4th and approved volunteer policy and gratuities for the recycling facility. Also approved converting one vacant CCS service facilitator position to a quality program specialist. Approved converting one vacant CCS service facilitator position to a clinical services supervisor. Approved a starting hourly rate above midpoint up to $25 per hour for the criminal support specialist. We waived the 6-month limit for casual employees working over 30 hours per week for the COVID disease investigator contact tracing at the health department. I am also bringing a resolution tonight forward establishing elected officials' compensation for the clerk of courts, coroner, and sheriff. I so move.
So motion by Supervisor Marish, seconded by Supervisor Dizak to adopt the resolution. Discussion on the motion. We'll start with Supervisor Aulick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to kind of give this a little bit of context, as many of you know, I used to sit where County Clerk Backus is sitting, and when you'd see an elected official, whatever the titles are, come up for a resolution, it was never fun, put it that way. And then back in those days, when it was discussed by the county board, sometimes you get into discussions like, well, is Jamie worth 60,000 or 6250, or you'd get into all these numerical games on the floor of the county board. I don't know if you've seen the last scene of Braveheart, where basically Mel Gibson is getting his guts ripped out, piece by piece, intestine by intestine. That's what it felt like. I did everything in my power to just stare at the agenda. And then I'd look up at the supervisors, and it looked like they were all eating lemons because it was one of the most uncomfortable things for everyone in the room to discuss, right? So the Personnel Committee and the Personnel Director, Sharon, did something extremely smart. They said, let's not have these discussions on the county board floor about jobs we may or may not know exactly what they do, and let's systematize that. So what they did, which again is extremely smart, is they had the positions banded, and then they assigned wages, 85% of the full wage band, to those positions, and that, I think, was an extremely, like I said, smart and intelligent decision. It takes a lot of a lot of that discussion, a lot of the assumptions out of the equation, and just says, this is what they do, this is their responsibilities, and this is what we're going to do, and that's great. Now, just to kind of think about the last time we talked about wage bands, we're talking Act 10, 2011, and that this followed that. So we're talking about 8, 9, 10 years ago, right? So a lot of things happen in 10 years. Job markets change, demand for certain positions change. I think of it like from a municipal standpoint, where I think of like housing stock, right? Maybe single-family condos are super hot and selling for more, and a duplex is selling for less. housing values change in a community, just the demand for different types of housing, right? Just like the demand of different types of occupations. And I'm assuming that in 2011, if you were to go out and ask for law enforcement officers, you'd get a pretty healthy dose of applicants. Knowing what I know, doing what I do, you can't find an officer to save your life that will pass the drug screen, the background check, and oh, by the way, it's 2022. Who wants to be in law enforcement? So there's a very select, very narrow, a very small pool of applicants, and guess what? They're getting almost like recruited like the military out of LTC, out of tech schools, and larger departments are saying, hey, law enforcement officer, we will offer you, we'll pay your education. We'll give you a big sign-on bonus. You come work for Green Bay. You come work for Oshkosh, something like that. So what I'm saying is the conditions on the ground aren't the same as when we established our wage bands. Now, I'll compare a little bit of what I know, and that is City of Kiel, 3,932 people strong and growing, right? We have 8 full-time officers, including our chief. Our chief of police is paid a little over $103,000 a year. 8 full-time officers, a few part-timers, $103,000 a year. In 2022, if you look at what the sheriff is being paid, who, by the way, has over 110 employees, has basically half of Kellnersville locked up in the jail, and I just like using analogies. That's true. I mean, basically 150 people are in the jail, a small village when you really think about it, and a third of the county budget, $12 million, he's getting paid $93,513 this year, up until through the end of the term. Now, I depersonalize things. I think about them as positions. I don't think about them as people. But what I'm saying is, think of little old Kiel, 8 full-time officers, $103,000 a year the chief's making. Think of all the headaches that the sheriff has to put up with a jail, with 110 people, the budget that he has, all the different things he has to manage. He being a he in this particular case, could be a she, depending on the outcome of an election. That's a big difference. Now, we can pivot back to the person opts to run for office. The person makes that choice, and I get that. Been there, right? I agree. But at the same time, when you think of what a law enforcement organization is, it's a very vertical organization. You go into law enforcement, you work your way up through ranks, et cetera, et cetera. And even though we think of like County Executive Ziegelbauer gets paid less than his department directors in a lot of cases, right? Well, law enforcement's a little different. It's a vertical organization. You got to know law enforcement, you got to have management skills, and you got to have people skills. And I think we definitely have that with people that are running the place. But anyway, I think that if I have a point tonight, it's to really think about maybe we need a second look at what we're paying for our positions, because it's been 10 years. I'm not one here to change the amounts that we're paying people on the floor. What this yellow piece of paper is an amendment to the current resolution, which basically would strip out the language referring to sheriff. It would allow the clerk of courts and coroner language to go through, but and it would I would in my motion also refer it back to the personnel committee for more consideration. But what I'm really concerned about is the fact that we should take another look at what we're paying our employees, do the comparables, call the people back who did our study, and just say, hey, Manitowoc County, are we in the range of our neighbors, of similar counties, etc.? Because it's not just Kiel. When you think about wages. It's also the city of Manitowoc. It's the city of Two Rivers. They're all paying their leadership more than what we are. And again, you can say, absolutely, you make the choice when you run for office that you're taking that pay cut, but what I would say is we want the absolute best people running our jail, running our sheriff's office. They have jurisdiction throughout the county, including all the cities that have police departments. I mean, this is an extremely, extremely important position as we could discuss it. This is one of those where it may go down, but I'm standing on fairness and principle on this one. I truly believe that we are underpaying this position in particular. And if we pass this tonight as is, what you've done then, even if you were to go back a year from now, you've effectively locked in a lower wage for 4 years for that particular position. So that's why I'm making this motion, Mr. Chair, to amend it. And if you want me to make that motion, I can do that right now.
If you so wish.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I move to amend Resolution 21-2253 to strike references to the sheriff and refer the matter of the sheriff's compensation back to the Personnel Committee.
So that is your motion, correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
So, motion by Supervisor Alec. Is there a second to his motion? Seconded by Supervisor Henriksen. So we will have discussion on the motion now, just on the amendments to as Supervisor Alec made. We'll start with Supervisor Marsh.
To ask Sharon to come up.
Sure.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Susie, or Supervisor Marsh, did you have a question or a comment?
I would, I guess, explain the reasoning behind and also the wage banding and how the sheriff is on the top, but he has the ones below him and their banding and their decision-making, how that all goes together with that.
Okay, thank you. So we do use a method of job compensation here called the decision band method of job compensation. And I think the really strong part about our compensation system is its simplicity. Every position that's non-represented in Manitowoc County is placed in a decision band. And how we do that is we look at the types of decisions that the position can make and the impact of those decisions on the organization. So every non-represented regular position is put in a decision band. The sheriffs, as Supervisor Alec said, what we did back in 2017 was passed a resolution and put into the county code the fact that we were going to put all elected officials into that same decision band method. Part of that process involved going to the elected officials, asking them to describe for us the decisions that they make, the impact of the decisions on the organization, and then we banded the elected officials. The sheriff's position bands out in a D73. That is the highest wage band of any elected official, with the exception of the executive, because the impact of the executive's decisions impact the entire organization, where the impact of the sheriff affects the sheriff's department. The sheriff, with, again, backing up, we have decision bands that go from A to F. For department directors who don't have overall responsibility for decisions that affect the entire county, the highest wage band that they can be in is a D. The sheriff is the highest banded department director in the D wage band as a D73. Again, reflecting the complexity of the operation and the types of decisions that are made. The second in command in the sheriff's office is a D72. That is the highest band given to a non-department director because of the amount of decision-making delegation that is placed in that second-in-command operation. So the decision bands are consistent. The decision bands are sound. The code says that the elected officials should be placed at 85% of the salary of the wage band. Midpoint of our wage band is 67%. So we have a minimum, we have 5 steps, we have midpoint, and then there's a range between midpoint and maximum. Midpoint on the wage schedule is meant to equate to someone being fully trained and competent. So the elected officials are put at 85%. The assumption is made that the people who are our elected officials are fully trained and competent to carry out the duties associated and the decisions associated with those positions. If positions are less than 85% of the wage band, they should get an increase of 5% a year up until the time that they reach 85%. Once 85% is reached, from that point forward, the salary is indexed up for the remainder of the term based on a calculated average of the change in the CPI over the last 4 years. So the resolution that is in front of you this evening with the sheriff would have the sheriff going up that 5% for the first 2 years of the term and then going up in the last 2 years of the term by that CPI index, that average of the last 4 years, which I believe is like 2.05%. And I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has.
We'll start with Supervisor Falkowski on the amendment.
Thank you, Jane. My general question is, how rigid is this structure? Like, for instance, if in fact you find the labor force changing, that dynamic changes, can the personnel committee actually embark on changes that would reflect that? Or do we have to do this up front and it's committed for a number of years? I mean, is there some fluidity with this or not?
The decisions don't change even if the labor market changes. The decisions are what the decisions are. The question is, what do you do with the wage schedule itself? This year for the non-represented pay plan, the board implemented the proposed 2% general wage increase. So all non-represented people who are on the pay plan got a 2% increase effective January 1st on their anniversary date and position. Depending on their placement on the grid, they can either get a step, which is about 3%, or they can get a merit-based increase if they're between midpoint and maximum. And that increase is either 1% or 2%. So every year, the board, as part of your budget process, what you do is you look at what that overall general wage increase is that you would like to grant, but that's different than changing decision bands. Remember, decision bands are based on the decisions you make and the impact of those decisions on the organization. The inflationary increase, if you will, to the wage schedule is something totally different. That is applied equally and across the board. Now, what's different when you're setting the salary for elected officials is, of course, you have to set the salary before the first day that people can take out papers for the office, and once the salary is established, it cannot be changed during that term of office. So in that sense, elected official salaries are different, and elected officials do not have a performance-based wage progression. You know, the statute says these are the responsibilities of the elected office. That person is elected to office and they serve in that office. They answer to no one other than the voters. So there is a difference between elected officials and employees in terms of progression, but the decision band can be equally applied because, again, that ranking is based simply on one factor. What are the decisions you are required to make, and what are the impact of those decisions on the organization?
Thank you. So any deviation from this plan basically starts cascading into other decision-making?
The integrity of this plan is dependent upon the consistency with which it is applied.
I was wondering about that. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Supervisor Falkowski. Supervisor Dizak on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mine are more comments than questions. I may develop a question in this, but I do agree with the concept of what Supervisor Aulick is saying, and no one has more respect in the sheriff's department than I do, but the way I look at this is, A, it's kind of late in the game. There's a lot of systems and setup and formulas that have been used to determine these salary ranges for these people. If we want to revisit this at some time, whether that's tomorrow or next month or next year, and again, there's more rules based on the term of the elector, right? So to do that and do it properly, to come up with a salary range that you mentioned, it's the Manitowoc Police, the Kiel Chief of Police. It seems to me like you need to do a market study, which is a ton of time. Meanwhile, what do we pay our sheriff? So it's you know, maybe it's been 10 years since we came up with this. It could be revisited, but I think this is the inappropriate time to do that. I don't think it should be a dead issue, because I tend to agree with a lot of your points, Supervisor Aulick, I really do. But I think the timing is the issue here, so I don't think I could support this at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Dizak. Supervisor Niles on the amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The question I have regarding the decision band process, my only question is, how does Manitowoc County's decision band process compare to that of other counties that participate in the same practice?
If you would look at other counties who also use the decision band method of job evaluation, you would find our banding of positions is uncannily consistent. It truly is.
Okay.
And again, I credit that to the clearness of this job evaluation method. I've used, years ago, we had a complicated system that had 10 different factors that could be interpreted 10 different ways, and you started getting inconsistency because, quite honestly, people applied the standards different over time, and that caused internal inequity. When we decided, and by we, I mean the county board, adopting and approving us using this decision band method of job evaluation, the integrity that it has and the internal consistency that we have is because those standards have been clearly applied and have been consistently applied over time. Its simplicity is not a sign of weakness. I really think its simplicity is a sign of strength. That's what's kept us internally consistent and strong.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it does seem like a very cut and dried type of system, and I totally stand behind it. So thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Supervisor Niles. Any other questions for Sharon this time? All right, thank you very much, Sharon.
You're welcome.
I'll still keep it open for discussion, obviously, on the amendment. Supervisor Benke, you were next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I remember the days of the angst that Supervisor Aulick was talking about when we would vote for 0% increases for 4 years running, and it was really nasty. We were pulling numbers, a lot of times we were pulling numbers from who knows where. And that was in a time of not a very good time. And the decisions, the banding system is based upon the decision-making. I question if we're going to use comparables to whether Kiel is maybe paying their police chief just a little bit too much for watching 8 people. Just a thought, or I might change my resume. But I appreciate the fact that Supervisor Aulick is questioning some of these things, and it's tough because we have and I said this at personnel, we have very good people in these elected positions, including the coroner, including the clerk of courts. We have very good people in these positions, so it makes it even more difficult to find out. I mean, if we were looking back in the days when we had somebody driving a truck with a loudspeaker on running for sheriff, I might be looking at a little bit different situation today. But Sharon's explanation of it's consistent, it's fair. The county board has put it at the 85%. And it's nothing against the sheriff, because I think the sheriff has done a nice job working with finally we have a sheriff that works with the county executive versus fighting the county executive. We've done some innovative changes that the sheriff has made. He does a nice job. None of that comes into this, but if we change this now for one individual and not treat everybody the same in the elected positions, we are doing a disservice to the other people that we have set those salaries in the past. And if we want to revisit down the line, we can revisit down the line if you want to go above that 85%, but that's a decision that this body should make. But at this point in time, this is the fairest way to pay our elected officials. It's simple, it's fair, it's equal across the board, and I will not support the amendment. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor Banky. Any other discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, the clerk will now conduct the vote. Oh, I'm sorry, Supervisor Metzger, I apologize.
I just have a question because when you read the be it further resolved, it also says something in there with the coroner too, which was not brought. If you want to explain that a little bit more.
Supervisor Aulick, you can.
Supervisor Metzger, what are you referring to? I'm sorry.
Where it says the coroner will be paid an annual working condition of 546. Line 89.
89. Well, that's in the original resolution.
Oh, it is. Okay,
Yes.
I thought you were.
Yep. So it's already included.
Okay.
Sharon, did you have something yet?
Part of the decision ban method of job evaluation, again, it's the decisions you're charged to make and the impact of those decisions on the organization. We also have a component of the pay plan which is called a working condition premium. We know that there are some positions that, regardless of how careful we are to protect our employees, there's some hazards we can't protect people against. We can't protect people against having to drive in hazardous conditions. We can't protect highway workers from having to work on the interstate close to fast-moving traffic. We can't protect law enforcement officers from the very hostile situations that they're called into. 2 of our elected officials qualify for working condition premium pay, and one is the coroner and one is the sheriff. And the resolution continues those working condition premiums for those 2 offices as it has done in the past and is consistent with other positions similarly graded. The other change that you'll also notice is the sheriff is unique as well in that the sheriff receives the same uniform allowance that is provided to the uniformed officers of the department.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Supervisor Metzger, you still have the floor.
I'm finished.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Aulick to the amendment.
Thank you. Just one last parting comment, and absolutely respect what Supervisor Benke said and what the Personnel Committee has really done with this. I guess it's true that it's fair within the internal system of which it exists, right? So if you treat all the elected officials the same, 85% of the wage band, let's just say that the wage band is fair. I don't necessarily know that it's fair within the external dynamics that it exists. If you're looking at law enforcement as a labor market and you're looking around not only within the county but without, you'll notice that what we're paying for a leader of our law enforcement organization is low compared to the other counties. And it may be consistent with the ones that are wage banded similarly, but I guess if I had a challenge for us is to at least take a second look going forward. And yes, Supervisor Dizak, you're absolutely right. That's not an instantaneous study by any means. However, there definitely are people that we've worked with to develop the system to come in, take a second look. And what I really worry about is when this resolution passes tonight, I'll go back to we've then locked in this system for 4 years for all those positions. So just something to think about. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor Olick. Any other discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, the clerk will now conduct the vote.
Supervisors will now vote on the motion to amend Resolution 2021-2022-53 to strike references to the sheriff and refer the matter of the sheriff's compensation back to the Personnel Committee.
The amendment failed on a 5-12 vote with Supervisors Zollek, Niles, Wagner, Engelbrecht, and Henriksen voting yes. So we are back to the main motion of the original resolution. Any other discussion on that motion to adopt the resolution? Seeing none? Oh, I'm sorry, is there? All set? Okay. Might have had a little problem, but we're good. All right, if there's nothing else, the clerk will now conduct the vote.
Supervisors will now vote on the resolution 2021-2022-53, resolution establishing elected officials' compensation for the clerk of courts, coroner, and sheriff.
Resolution passed 16-1 with Supervisor Henriksen voting no. So, very good discussion. Thank you. And I'm sure I'll give the Personnel Committee some, even though it's a 4-year commitment, but there's still other electeds that come up on different times. So the discussion will always continue is I guess what I'm trying to say. So, anything else, Supervisor Marsh, from Personnel?
Well, I guess there is. No. Our next meeting is Tuesday, February, can you imagine that? February 1st at 4:15 downtown at the administration building. Thank you.
Any questions for Supervisor Marsh? Thank you very much. Planning Park Commission, Supervisor Dysek is the chair.
No report. Next meeting is Monday the 24th.
Any questions for Supervisor Dysek? Thank you very much. Public Safety Committee, is it going to be Supervisor Falkowski? Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you very much. Supervisor Falkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Public Safety Committee met on January 12th. This will be abbreviated report. Please refer to the posted minutes when they are produced and distributed. The committee chair conducted a procedural action to approve prior minutes and to hear any public comment. On the agenda was a briefing from the District Attorney LeBray. The volume of felony prosecutions has increased substantially. Even with the additional prosecutors, it's been consistently busy. The committee members inquired about the causal reasons for the noticeable increase in volume and principally, what is the effect? It is actually the distribution and use of illicit drugs, primarily methamphetamine and fentanyl, and they're the principal causes. We thank the district attorney for the professionalism and proficiency of the department, along with the gratitude and an acknowledgement to the district attorney's staff for their efforts. Our next meeting date is February 9th, and that is my report, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions for Supervisor Falkowski? Thank you very much. Public Works Committee, Vice Chair Supervisor Dysek will be giving a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We met January the 12th. We started out with a report from Mr. Reisenbeekler on the recycling and solid waste programs, and he also gave a brief overview of an annual, the 2021 annual business recycling survey that included 42 different businesses within the county. Following that, Mr. Bright gave an update on the 2022 capital projects, and this included some pay requests that were approved. First, we approved $53,097.54 to Hammond Construction for the remodeling of the jail visitation area. Next, we awarded $5,062 to Dinor Electric for electrical service and generator project here in the Heritage Center. As I mentioned, both of those were approved. We then approved the low bid from Schaus Mechanical for $62,800 for office complex boiler replacement project. Following that, Mr. Neuser gave an update on the community development block grant projects, and this also included 2 pay requests. First, for $94,411.10 to the Greenwood Project Management for the courthouse ADA restroom renovation. Then we approved the $69,300 $345.29 to the Joseph Schmidt Construction Company for the Cato Falls and Walla High Pavilion projects. Mr. Neuser then gave a report on the American Rescue Plan Act funded projects. That was a brief report, nothing new. Then we got a report from Mr. Neuser on the Communications Division, and we also got a final report on a grant request that we got $104,000. It was approved by the military, actually, for our 911 system upgrade. That project is done, but we've been reimbursed $104,000. Following that, we got a report from Mr. Berg and Callista, then on the IS division, including a report on the annual cybersecurity, including current security posture and recent and upcoming projects. It was a busy meeting. Mr. Neuser then gave a report on the expo activities and capital projects for 2022. That concluded with a discussion on the Expo Ice Center Board's recommendation to construct a secure room to house animal scale, or the animal scale, and that'll also be funded by the Market Animal Committee. After discussion, the recommendation was approved. Finally, we gave the board recommended appointment of Savannah Schut for the Expo Ice Spinner Board, and we approved her tonight also. And our next meeting is February 9th, and that concludes my report.
Any questions for Supervisor Dizak? Thank you very much. Anybody from the Transportation Coordinating Committee want to say anything? I know Supervisor Baumann is absent or is excused this evening. All right. With that, under announcements, just one quick one. Next county board meeting is Tuesday, February 15th. Since it is a primary day, and I know there's no county election-wide elections that day, Jessica would like to be available for the town clerks, village clerks across Manitowoc County if there's problems later in the election. So I'd like to meet at 5:30 p.m. that night here, obviously. So if nobody has a real objection to that, we'll meet at 5:30 on the 15th. I've talked to several of you already. Seem to be all right. So, all right. With that, I'll accept the motion to adjourn. Motion by Supervisor Falkowski, second by Supervisor Mink. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a safe trip home. Stay warm.